So I'd like to start out with a question. The question is, are you one of God's tools? Are you one of God's tools? So I have a toolbox here. Ridiculously large toolbox. This here is a toolbox that Jackson got for his birthday. And I've got the video camera here, so I'm going to just set this down here. And in the toolbox, like I said, it was a gift for Jackson on his birthday. Mr. Lambert, or Papa, bought him a toolbox, figured he was old enough to start building things. The problem is, I'm not sure who's going to teach him how to build things, as I really don't have that skill of building things. I try to fix things, but then I usually have to call Lori to come over and fix what I tried to fix. So in the toolbox is obviously a bunch of different tools. Now, Papa said before you use any tools that, although safety glasses maybe not necessarily a tool, something that you have to put on first. And tools are designed for different things, and here is a tool here, the safety glasses, designed to protect your eyes. Well, then you have your hammer that fixes things sometimes, or really designed to hammer things in, hammer nails, put things together. You have your tape measure, obviously designed for measuring different things. We have different pliers. There's several different pliers. You have your vice grips for holding and turning. Your needle nose pliers when you're fishing to get the hook out of the fish mouth is what we use it for, not necessarily for fixing things around the house. Different type of pliers, cable cutters. Each of these tools, like I said, is designed for a different purpose. They're all designed for a different purpose. Now there's a bunch of different tools left in there. I'm not going to take them one at a time and go through them, but really just to demonstrate that there's many different types of tools, and each tool is designed for a specific purpose. Have you ever had to measure something and didn't have a tape measure? So you're trying to figure out if something's going to fit in a particular area and you don't have a tape measure. Maybe if that picture is going to fit on the wall. Well, what do? Well, you walk over to the picture with your hands, right? And you measure the picture, and then by the time you get over to the wall, your hands have moved. They're separated. Not a good device for measuring things. The tape measure is a much better tool. That's what it's designed for. Your hands weren't designed for measuring. Maybe you have that screw that you gotta screw in. Well, a butter knife will work. A dime sometimes will work. But it's not as efficient. The screwdriver is a much better tool. Again, each tool has a specific purpose. Proper tools allow us to get the job done quicker and with better quality. Tools are important, and each tool serves a specific purpose. Without the proper tools, even the simplest of jobs becomes much more difficult. So does God have tools? Another question for you. Does God have tools? We know that God is working on His grand and perfect plan to bring all of His sons and daughters to glory. So does God use tools in order to accomplish His ultimate plan of bringing each and every one of us and all of those in the world, hopefully eventually, into His kingdom? Does He have tools to accomplish that? He absolutely does. It's not a toolbox like this, but He does use tools. Brethren, God uses each and every one of us as His tools. We are one of God's tools. He uses us differently because we have each been blessed with different things. We each have been blessed with different skills and different abilities. And those skills and abilities will differ from person to person. However, God knows what skills and abilities that He has blessed us with. He knows what strengths we have. He knows what weaknesses we have. And He will use us as He sees fit to serve Him and to serve each other. So one of the tools that God uses that we all must consider is the tool of peacemaker. The tool of peacemaker. Remember that one of God's goals is to bring all of His sons to glory. And we read that in Hebrews 2, verse 10. I'm not going to turn there, just as a reference. Hebrews 2:10, that's where it talks about God wanting to bring all of His sons to glory. So in order for us to be brought to glory, the first thing we need to be able to do is to be called God's sons according to that scripture. So the next question then becomes, well, what do we need to do in order to be called God's sons? Now, of course, there's way too many requirements to cover in a 15-minute, 20-minute sermonette. But what I would like to do is cover just one of those requirements this morning. One of those requirements to be called God's sons. One of the things we need to do is we need to allow God to use us as His tools. We can act as God's tools in many different ways. Just as there are many tools required to, say, build a house, God uses many different tools as He is building and preparing for His kingdom. As we begin to focus this sermonette on just one of God's uses as us as a tool, turn with me, if you would, to Matthew 5, verse 9. Matthew 5, verse 9. This is one of the requirements for us to be called one of God's sons. In Matthew 5, 9, it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. So the tool that God needs us to be is a peacemaker. God expects us to be a peacemaker. Reading Matthew 5:9, we are required to be a peacemaker if we're going to be called one of God's sons. I know I look forward to the time when I am brought to glory and made one of God's sons in His kingdom. Therefore, I know I really need to work on my abilities as a peacemaker. I have a long ways to go. Got a lot of work to do in that area. They say that practice makes perfect. Although we know that we will never reach perfection, as there are only two that have that distinction, God and Jesus Christ, but we can get closer and closer with practice. So as we look at the world around us, certainly a lot of negatives, but if we can have one positive spin on the state of affairs that we find ourselves in, the crisis in this world, the lack of morals, the lack of ethics, the violence, the crime, I mean, you can go on. But if we can take that and put a positive spin on it, it would be that we will have plenty of opportunity to practice being a peacemaker. Plenty of opportunity for us to practice being a peacemaker in the world that we're living in. In Psalms 34:14, Psalms 34:14, it's very clear here that we are to seek peace. It says, "Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace." Don't expect it to come to us. We need to seek peace and pursue it. It can be very, very difficult to be the peacemaker. It's not an easy job. Although God gives us plenty of jobs that we're required to do that aren't easy. But oftentimes when the reward is great, the things that are required to get there are difficult. This is one of those things. People treat us poorly all the time. Our human and carnal nature is not to find peace, but to seek revenge, get even. That's our first instinct, typically. In Matthew 26, Jesus Christ provides an example for us with regards to making peace. In Matthew 26, verse 51, this here is the account when Jesus was betrayed and captured, arrested prior to His crucifixion. In Matthew 26, verse 51, it says, "Then the men stepped forward. They seized Jesus and arrested Him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear." Boy, a pretty tough situation there. Your friend has been seized. Your teacher has been seized. You're looking for revenge. Jesus didn't allow that. What did He say in verse 52? He said, "Put your swords back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." And then Christ goes on to say in verse 53, "Do you think that I cannot call on my Father, and He will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the Scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?" Brethren, sometimes we need to step back and look at the situation that may be difficult and say, this is God's plan. We may not understand it. We may not know why it's happening this way. But God doesn't want us to strike back with revenge and violence. He doesn't. Jesus Christ set that example for us in Matthew 26. See, this was could have been a potentially deadly situation for Peter, who was the one who actually cut the ear off of the servant, but all of the other people that were around there. Had Jesus not stepped in, they may have all been killed at that point. But Jesus stepped in and he was the peacemaker. Another account of this is in Luke 22, verse 49. Adds another detail. Not only did Christ tell them to put their swords away, he took it one step further to ensure that, this situation did resolve as peacefully as possible. In Luke 22:49, it says, when Jesus' followers saw that what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And again, Christ said in verse 50, he says, and one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But then Jesus said, no more of this. No more of this. And then what did he do? Not only did he tell them to stop with the swords, he healed the ear. Now this was the man that was trying to take him into captive, unfairly and unjustly. His friends were trying to, lash out at the people that were trying to take him captive and get that revenge. Christ said, no, stop. And not only did he tell him to stop, he healed the man that was trying to take him captive. In this account, Jesus was trying to teach Peter and all of the other people that were there a pretty valuable lesson, and a lesson that each of us can learn from. And that lesson is the lesson about making peace. Making peace. Those with Jesus, they were ready to fight. He said, no more. Stop. It has to happen this way. As I was kind of looking through some information on the UCG website, I came across this blog, some information on peacemaking. It says here, in American West folklore, the Colt 45 revolver was known as the peacemaker. I do remember that from some old Wild West movies. It goes on to say, gunning down anyone who disagrees with you is a violently and aggressive concept of peacemaking. And kind of a funny part, it says, especially if you're the one getting shot. Kind of makes sense. It says, many people go through life as verbal gunfighters, ready to slay their opponent with words at the slightest provocation. How would we have handled the situation if we were with Christ? Would we have verbally attacked him? Would we have been the one who kind of took out that sword and was going to get even on his behalf? I don't know. It is very difficult to hold our tongue when we are being attacked or dealt with unfairly. However, we know that if we are to seek peace and pursue it, how does engaging in an argument or in engaging in violence help us in seeking peace? Clearly it doesn't. Proverbs 13:3 tells us what we're supposed to do when we get that urge to have an argument with somebody else. Proverbs 13, verse 3. It says, he who guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips shall have destruction. If you think about that, most of the time that we get ourselves into deeper and deeper trouble is when we open our mouth. I had to tell a student that multiple times this week. If you were just to keep your mouth closed when somebody spoke to you, you would never be in my office. He's a student that always has to have the last word. And I told him, if you have the last word with me, you're going home with a suspension. Because it's not about getting the last word. Sometimes whether it's right or wrong, you just say, okay. I said, if you were to use those two little letters together more often, you would not have the trouble that you have. Teacher tells you to do, okay. And if they were doing you wrong, then you come to me. That is my job to take care of the teacher, not yours. We're making progress with them, but we're not there yet. This week was an opportunity for me to hold my tongue multiple times. We had a board meeting this week. And during this board meeting, the news was there. There were a lot of parents there. And they were all bent out of shape about this. I don't know if you've been following the things in the news about the state testing grades 3 through 8. Well, this board meeting was just packed with parents that were not happy with the state testing. They were not happy with me in particular. And multiple times throughout this board meeting, they mentioned the middle school principal and how he's doing this and how he's doing that and how he's treating our children poorly. Well, they didn't say my name, but there's one middle school principal in the district. So one of the board policies is you can't complain about an employee and use their name. So they said middle school principal. Doesn't take a genius to figure out who that is. The guy sitting in the back row, the only one in the district. So they just verbal attack after verbal attack going, and they're making these complaints to the Board of Education and the superintendent who sits there in the middle. Well, I got madder and madder, but I couldn't say anything for a couple different reasons. It's not appropriate, obviously, but had I said something, I would have thrown my other colleagues under the bus, the other elementary principals in particular, because this wasn't my policy. This was a board policy that I was forced to follow. So they were mad at me, thinking it's middle school, because that's who they were complaining about. So had I said something, you know, I'm following district procedure, district policy, well, now they're going to start pointing the fingers at all the other principals as well. The question is, would that have been in keeping as my role and requirement of a peacemaker? Probably not. So then I got madder and madder as the superintendent sat up there and did absolutely nothing. This is his policy now that I'm forced to follow. Did nothing to defend his administrators. Not a word. Just sat there. Now, it really would have been easy to stand up and throw him under the bus. I would have loved to have been a double-decker bus. But again, would have that been appropriate? Would that have been in keeping with God's intention of being a peacemaker? Probably not. Still may do it? No, can't do it. God tells us we are not to do that. Even though we want to, we have that carnal nature that says, this isn't right. It's not me. I'm just doing what I'm told to do. I either do it or I don't have a job. And again, it's not abusing children. It's we have a difference in opinion on that. But again, you can't say anything. I had to be the peacemaker in that situation. Brethren, we will all face situations, probably multiple situations, in which we'll be faced with a choice. That choice being, do we engage in behaviors that are contrary to what God expects with regards to making peace? Or do we follow Christ? Do we take a difficult situation and kind of turn it around? I mean, you can read multiple accounts where Christ was in some pretty hairy situations, and the way he dealt with it completely flipped situations. Now, that was obviously things for his benefit, but as we read those, they're examples for us so that as we move through this crazy life that we're living in, that we know if we follow these, we can take a difficult situation and we can turn it around by either not saying anything or choosing our words carefully, not engaging, but trying to de-escalate that situation. See, God has many tools in his toolbox. Brethren, we are probably one of those most important tools in that box. He's using each and every one of us. We need to make sure that we allow God to use us as we have a hand in trying to establish some peace in this world. Now, we know that peace isn't going to be established until eventually the kingdom is here, but we can make pockets of peace as we go about and act as the peacemaker in this crazy world. Brethren, we know that there is a day coming when God will call us sons. We know that there is a day coming when God will bring us all to glory. Until that time comes, remember to seek peace. It may not always come to us. We may have to seek it. Remember to seek that peace. Pursue that peace. Remember to flee from evil and do good. And brethren, remember to be that peacemaker.